The good news is that the Chapter 11 filings in asbestos litigation have basically come to a stop. And the reason for this is that most states either have had state legislation where criteria has been imposed so that the non-malignant, non-impaired cases no longer are able to be filed. They're put on an inactive docket. And in states where there hasn't been state legislation, because the legislature deems those claims meritorious claims, there's been a plural registry mandated by the court. And so in order to control the docket, the court under, like in New York, the CPLR has authority to manage their docket in any way. And they choose to handle the malignancy cases and people that have restrictive impairment by pulmonary function tests. So there's medical criteria for the plural registries. Now, the result on asbestos bankruptcies has been that not only has the present docket throughout the country been dramatically reduced by the number of cases. 70 to 80% of the cases in a lot of the jurisdictions have gone off the docket. And then with respect to new filings, the number of new filings have drastically been reduced, maybe to 10% of what they once were, because people are now waiting with the non-malignant cases to wait until they meet the criteria that's been set forth by the legislature or by the court. So the result of that on existing asbestos companies has been that their balance sheets have greatly improved. Their reserves have dramatically changed. So when they file their 10Qs and 10Ks with the SEC, their reserves could be much lower, so they're much healthier companies. And in addition, the payouts that they're paying on an annualized basis in the tort system are much, much lower because you don't have these hundreds of thousands of non-malignant, non-impaired cases. So that's good news for the asbestos companies, and that's why we're not seeing the bankruptcies that we saw in the 90s and in early 2000. The other good news is that many of the bankruptcies that have been caught up in litigation have worked their way through the courts and are coming out of bankruptcy with confirmed plans and trusts. The bankruptcy process is a very long and time-consuming process, sometimes taking 5, 6, 7, 8 years for a company to emerge from bankruptcy, and the transaction costs are enormous. That's why over the last few years, people like John and I have tried to do what are called prepackaged bankruptcies, where we negotiate the bankruptcy with the debtor and the other constituencies beforehand. We have a plan, go to the bankruptcy court, file it, and we save literally hundreds of millions of dollars and years of litigation. But that's not always possible, and we'll talk about that a little later too.